Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I just finished Anomaly Arbitration Day 1 with effectively no more than 6 cost in every night stage. Sorry if this is uploaded late. Recording RNG was going crazy and I wanted to record B-roll for this account instead of faking it, you know. And this is going to be me yapping about the general difficulty, the boss mechanics and blessings, my run and solutions on these enemies too. You can treat this as a guide if you run into the same situations that I did, as well as the best teams for it. So yeah, let's get on to the video. It seems that they are really going through the pattern of the knights being very hard to complete and the king being really simple. Like always, we start with the easiest knight and then progressively getting harder into the king stage. The easiest is Knight 3. Knight 3 has the new enemy, the Peacock, which shields elation damage, the Blaze Out of Space, a release boss, and Sam, who released almost 2 years ago. The stage debuff reduces your crit damage by 10 stacks, and using a skill point reduces 1 stack. It's a shared debuff, so if you consume a lot of SP on your hyper carry, everyone else's crit damage debuff gets reduced. The only new enemy is the Peacock, so I guess we can talk about it. The Peacock starts with no innate weaknesses. It can't be broken even if you deal toughness damage to it, and it should be broken. And it also has a really high damage reduction. It has a paint mechanic that has 6 stacks. When you attack the Peacock, the ability's element that you hit it with will be added to the Peacock's weakness list, and you get 1 stack of paint. So for example, if you hit this enemy with Fei Xiao's skill, the Peacock gains wind weakness and then 1 paint. Fei does her follow-up attack and gets another paint stack. Then let's say Mutsu does a follow-up attack, and you get lightning weakness on the Peacock and then a paint stack, and so on. If you use elation damage, you gain another additional stack. Additional damage doesn't count, by the way. Once it hits 6 stacks, it goes into the aggressive mode, where the damage reduction goes down, starts attacking you, and reducing its paint stacks while it's attacking you. If the Peacock's paint goes to 0, it does a big AoE attack. But if you break before the paint goes to 0, they will take self-damage based on the amount of paint that is still there. So the general gist of this Peacock boss is that you want to attack it a lot, and you want to break them as fast as possible to maximize the amount of self-damage they take. Overall, the boss HP is not very high, the Peacock does not live long enough for its gimmick shilling elation to be an active issue, and is counterable by CCFX and fast breaking, like Ron May's weakness break efficiency. The HP is still demanding enough that most 2.x DPS is going to struggle, but at least it's within the realm of possibility to clear. The boss also doesn't hit hard. The Peacock will only hit hard if you don't play its gimmick, in which case you're not making the damage anyway, so it doesn't matter. Blaze is a pushover, and Sam is only a few resets away from clearing. What makes this an outright freebie though, is who it shills. Sparkle and Archer are completely free, along with Permansword Tarai and RMC. If you have all 4 units, this is an easy 3-star with a good build. And, without Permansword Tarai, you can run someone like Pela or Ron May and get a 0 cycle out of it. Again, the enemies don't hit really hard and the HP isn't high, so you can get away with a fair bit here. In my hipster American account, I used Anaxa instead, because of his toughness shred and implants being really strong to counter the gimmick. It's also fair to note that this stage might be so easy for Archer that you might run someone weaker, just so Archer can fight bigger fish that needs his power. I think this fight comes down to a matter of, if you invested well into who this shills, like Archie and... why did I say Archie? Archer and Sparksy. Wow, Archie from the comic book? Anyway, I'm getting distracted. It's straight up overkill to use Sparkle and... what? It's straight up overkill to use Sparksy and Archer if you have them well invested. Therefore, it's optimal to use someone else. But if you do have a low investment Archer and Sparkle, and you don't really have an intention to invest into them any further, this is basically just a free 3-star for you and move on with your life. Even non-shield DPS can still get through this as long as they consume SP enough and attack enough for the Peacock. The weaker options that I can see clearing is Fei Xiao. Since the stainless is really easy, her performance becomes massively inflated with her E2. You can use Break, but Break has bigger fish to fry. Acheron with a scuffed ass wheelchair comp with a Silverwolf probably works, but that's very optimistic. Either way, this is the easiest by far, because they literally gave you the best answer for free. The next stage is Knight 1. Knight 1 is the death of crit damage pretty much, but if you follow this restriction, it's way too easy. Wave 1 is the DOT T-Rex and the DOT Manta Ray. Wave 2 is the new Sam that blocks crit damage except for one character and gives a lot of break effect. Oh, and if you think it's fine to brute force with crit, the stage debuff is the one that reduces your crit damage the lower the enemy HP is. That's so much fun, isn't it? We've never seen this one before. This is probably the best anti-sparkle selector argument ever, and at this point I don't think this is going away. This fight is really hard, even without the debuff to use crit in, and with the debuff it's a lot worse. With that said, the HP is surprisingly not that high. Last time the anti-crit debuff was on the Swarm side, and in my experience running break with a sustain for the Swarm didn't 3-star clear, but sustainless did. And in this case, I did manage to get a Fugue with Cipher LC run to reach a healthy 1 cycle even using a sustain like Gallagher. Of course I had to take away the Sig to fry bigger fish, but let's discuss that later, it's still a 2 cycle. Because of how low the HP of the boss is, I can see very well built Everknights being able to clear this through sheer crit damage buffs. It's difficult to see anyone else clearing this though. It's just way too restrictive. But obviously, Break and DOT smoke this. My DOT team on my Asia account 0-cycled with a sustain, and I might as well use auto because there really was no technical expression for it. Thank you Black Swan Overflare for saving my life. Like I said, I don't think stages like this are gonna go away at this rate. If you don't have an anti-crit team, it's going to get a lot worse later. So if you don't have a Break or DOT team, Kafka in the selector I think is the best now. At least Sparkle can be grabbed on a banner, and to be honest, if you're not using Archer or Sparksy, Sparkle does have many alternatives. Kafka has no alternatives except Dahlia for a non-crit support team. And to ease your suffering, I recommend getting Kafka if you already have 3 to 4 solid crit teams. Because the way this is going, at least one of them is going to get blocked in the night stage. Overall, this fight is not very difficult. It's just a strict team check. For me, I didn't struggle because I had either Break or DOT on all of my accounts. But depending on who you ask, this can be the worst or the easiest stage ever. Just as a reminder, Anom is optional. As much as I preached about grabbing an anti-crit team support like Kafka, if you really don't want to grab Kafka, getting 1 star is easy. Play the game however you like, this is all optional at the end of the day. I just think nowadays having at least one anti-crit team will serve you well. Now we go on to the hardest night stage of this phase. Night 2. I don't think anyone's going to have a argument about this. Whoever designed these 2 stages with the debuff combinations have a special place in hell. I've probably said this 3 times in a row already. Like 3 patches in a row, I mean. It's not as bad as Huohuo, but still, let's just get through this and explain why this is so bad. The bosses are the Filth Eater, which eats corrosion debuffs, but gives itself defense shred if there's no corrosion. And the Griffin, which applies corrosion, and summons enemies that attack so many times in a row that also apply corrosion. The Wave 2 is Flame Reaver. As for the stage debuffs, Inversion consumes your HP based on how many enemies you hit, and Depowered, which cuts your energy in half at the start and gives you a minus 50% ERR debuff for 2 turns. The HP of this boss compared to the other knights feels a lot higher. Not just because, well, it is, but because of the mechanics. The debuff itself actively is a sign to use a sustain. For very few units, notably Mono Rem, this is not an issue. But for other teams, not being able to use sustainless is a huge damage drop, including even meta teams like Break or DOT. The other debuff is not much better. With this lineup, there's a couple of strong options that would have worked if this energy debuff just did not exist. Notably, Ruan, Mei, and Tribi. With their massive energy pools getting completely cut by this one debuff, they take a lot of time to ramp up and trigger their best effects. And this leads to a chain reaction of disaster with Flame Reaver. Because if you remember, Reaver is an AV lock boss, meaning you have to wait to do his mechanics. And for Tribi's teams, like the Herta, you need a certain amount of Reaver turns to trigger enough phases to kill Reaver. But because Wave 1 takes so long to clear because Tribi just doesn't get her E1 fast enough, you straight up might not have enough action value to trigger his last phase before the fight becomes a 2-star. Added to this, Reaver is a Feast or Famine boss, which means if you have enough relics and damage to cross Reaver's needed damage per phase, you're basically good. It's a very easy boss. But even if you miss that threshold by 1%, you're gonna get annihilated and you're gonna lose a lot of damage. Obviously, the debuffs forcing you to bring a sustain make this a lot harder because sustains don't contribute that much damage. In my own runs, I had to experiment with so many light cones and relic combinations, and had to craft a rope just to get the right damage profile down to do enough phase damage for Reaver. The reason why Reaver is so easy in the other modes is because he doesn't hit very hard, and by doing so Sustainless is more viable, and Sustainless is much easier to get to Feast rather than Famine. But in this case, this debuff actively tries to stop that. So unless you're Hyacine, or even you might even struggle with PT, then good luck. Is this worse than the Mono Remembrance Night 1 shill last time? If it wasn't for Sparkle, Nova Flare being free, and Archer being free, it probably would have, but I think it's easier thanks to the free characters that make your Night 3 much easier. I will talk about this more later, so stick around I guess. Point is, this is the stage you bring your absolute best characters to, because the damage check is not nice at all, because they added a sustain check on top of it. Reaver is a pretty generic boss, so the best characters and teams in the game are also the best units against it. You know, Mono Ram, fine on Archer, half Elation even works, DOT. Break with Dahlia can do this if you have DOT on Night 1. Just be careful using Tribi since her energy gets thrown off a cliff here. The damage threshold is just really rough for non-Hyacine teams. Ironically, Fei Xiao mains are probably going to clear this because they played with thresholds like these way too many times, I think. I don't know about Zila mains, maybe they're also salivating at this prospect. Now we have the King stage. Continuing the trend of Nuclear Bomb Knights and Coughing Baby King is the new Sparksy boss. I have no context to the story to know what this is all about really. But anyway, Wave 1 has new enemies, the Rocker Chicken, 2 Book Girls, and the old Chinese Gorilla. These Elation Shill enemies are a lot worse than the Peacock. All of them have an innate damage reduction, and can only dispel the damage reduction when the team gets Punchline. For Elation, this is as simple as breathing. For non-Elation, how do you get Punchline? Well, you don't. Yep, you're working with an innate damage reduction the entire Wave 1. Thankfully, the enemies have low HP to compensate, but now you have your answer why Mono Rem being a faster clear than Sparksy and Yao Guang is so funny. I guess we should talk about the buffs before we go any further. The first buff is a fraud, and only shows up if you get Punchline. And like I said, the enemies in buff don't actually give you Punchline, so it's completely useless until Wave 2. And it's not really strong enough to justify itself even if you use it on Wave 2. It's basically only for Yao Guang and Sparksy. The second buff cancels all crit but gives 30% final damage. The only viable non-crit teams are DOT and Break, so take your pick. The third is the most generic one and gives damage out and speed, so I guess you will want to use that. Oh, speaking of speed, the debuffs are really funny. Interference is back, which means your Sunday's probably gonna feel like a brick. Your team is randomly delayed between 5% to 10%, which really hurts specific speed tuning synergies. There's also Confinement, which reduces your damage until you ult 2 times. It's mostly a non-factor, to be honest. Thankfully, there's no energy debuffs here, so Aggie is useful, I guess. Back to the actual fight, Wave 1 is kinda just a wall of HP that falls over. Thankfully for all of the shilling these bosses have, they reasonably also lower their HP, otherwise we would have a big problem. I mean, hopefully the HP continues to decrease, right? Whatever, man. Second wave is the new Sparksy boss. The way this boss works is actually quite interesting. It's from the event that I talked about in this channel, where you send characters to a different field. This one only applies to one party member though, not multiple. The boss has an innate damage reduction phase at the start. On this boss's first turn, you can choose who to send into another battlefield. Let's call this one Battlefield 2. And while you're in the second battlefield, you're fighting 3 enemies. The character that went to the second battlefield can't attack the enemies on Battlefield 1, and the characters on Battlefield 1 can't attack Battlefield 2 enemies. So again, it's like the event. You can still target allies on different battlefields though. The goal of the character that got sent into the Shadow Realm is to kill the 3 enemies so they get sent back to the original battlefield. The goal of the characters on the original battlefield, while that's going on, will attack screens to buff the allies or debuff the enemies. There will be 3 enemies on the original battlefield, Sparksy, which doesn't take a lot of damage, and 2 screens. One screen is a screen with the character on the other side, and another screen with the enemies. If you hit the screen that has the allies on it, your ally that got abducted gets 10% res pen up to 40%. and if you hit the enemy screen, their damage decreases. I'm not sure of the value, but it can stack up to 4 times and it's pretty impactful. Sparksy herself advances the enemies on the other side. If you fail to kill before the timer ends, you get CC'd, get hit with a large AoE, and then Sparksy still doesn't take a lot of damage. If you do kill and fulfill the mechanic, Sparksy gives you 5 free SP, a free AHA instant, and then starts receiving a lot of damage. You can actually feasibly one-shot her directly into the second phase if you fulfill her gimmick. If the screens are not broken, Sparksy's next turn will do the gimmick again and let you select who goes to the other field. Second phase is the same thing, the enemies just get a lot more aggressive, and yeah, you might survive less easier on the second phase, but it's the same fight effectively. All of the mechanics are AV locked unless you're Elation. If you have Elation and think you aren't getting shield enough, the AHA instant just always activates on the second field if someone is there, so I guess you can have fun. Overall, this boss falls over pretty easily because of the lack of HP. Some teams do fail a lot harder than others. If you don't have supports that attack frequently, surviving gets really difficult. Obviously you want to hit the enemy screen to avoid dying, and because the character is in a 3v1 with the delay blessing, they can get completely annihilated. Gallagher straight up doesn't work because he needs his debuff to sustain. Silverwolf is more of a struggle because she's the same thing. You need her debuffs to support and she can't apply it on the other side. Dahlia's implant also doesn't work, but thankfully all of the premium break DPSs have their weaknesses there. The enemy on the other side is innately weak to fire, physical, and imaginary, so it covers all of them. DOT still works, since Arcana only needs dot application to apply, and High Sealant's Vortex only needs DOT count even if she isn't there. The bad part is that you can't trigger Kafka's follow-up attack for some reason. I think it's because she doesn't actually use her follow-up attack if the enemies die, and if there's no enemies to hit, she kind of gets confused, I think. Either way, Triby's additional damage works, and her field also works. Sunday is fighting his worst enemy debuff matchup, but otherwise he should work. Not sure what Finon does here exactly, like I don't know what his specific interaction is, so you can check out showcases of that. I haven't checked it out myself. So, just note that surviving can be difficult depending on the character's influence to the other battlefields. This is a pretty cool fight to be honest, but much easier than Night 2 of this phase for sure. So, how hard was this Anomaly Arbitration? Let's talk about it. I think this Anomaly Arbitration is easier than last time. I think the biggest factor of why this is a lot easier is the free Sparkle and Archer. The last time they gave you 3 strong knights, and all of them didn't have many good free teams, or the old DPS options just didn't work. And then you can have like 2 strong teams that could carry the rest. In this case, Knight 3 is easy enough that you can allocate most of your power to Knight 1 and Knight 2. It's not as free as last time. You can't just run Acheron willy-nilly like the Anom with Aquila and get a 3-star, but it's somewhat more feasible at least. In terms of kings, I think this is the second easiest boss, but it's a lot more cool than Aquila, so I'll give them props for that. It's an interesting boss design outside of the Elation Shilling. I guess we can talk about this because it is kinda relevant and it just popped into my mind. I don't think I like the concept of the king being free and the knights being really hard. For me specifically, in my specific account situation, it's not very good. If you look at my record on this one, where I cleared bronze against Aquila, I could bronze the king stage and then 3-star the knights pretty easily, but recently, this one with Sunday, I could 2-star the king stage, but I couldn't 9-star the knight stages. If you compare these scenarios, and then I pull up the rewards page right here, being able to 8-star knights and silver the king is outright worse rewards than bronze king and full knights. For my specific power level, this is actively worse than the previous design of a hard king and easy knights. Of course, this isn't universal, this is for my expectation of power level, because for some people, clearing the king is really hard, so the fact that they could bronze at all is already a bigger reward. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get the reroll dice, which is a huge reward. My point is just, I'm getting discriminated with my power level of these, rewards, I think. Anyway, that's all. I do like this Anomaly Arbitration. Again, it's all optional at the end of the day. I respect the king stage design outside of Shill, and I continue to look at the knight stages in disgust. I'm so glad I'm pulling Ash Veil to finally not get bricked by knight stages with my unusable E0 Robin. I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to him so much. But anyway, this was fun. Like, share, comment, do the algorithm stuff. I'll see you next time. I should be talking about the nature of dreams probably a few hours after this video is released, maybe, but most likely tomorrow. But anyway, I'll see you guys on the next video. Should be fun.